1941. I had just graduated from high school. I had gotten a job, my first job, full-time job, at a factory where they made women's lingerie. I was the stenographer and assistant bookkeeper. I worked from 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. 5 days a week, and I had for Saturday, every day, $18. And then every had to do this real horrible thing. And we got very busy, and we got very busy. The Wrights got very busy too. And I had a friend who lived in Leon, New Jersey. That's where I was raised. And she got a job in Wright Aeronautical in the personnel department. And she told me that I would be qualified. So I applied. I went over there to Patterson. I was interviewed, and I did my stenography and typewriting test. And 2 weeks later, I received a telegram on a Sunday morning that I was hired. I never told my boys that I was going to leave, but I left. So I quit, and I found out that I had to be at the factory at 7 a.m. and work until 4 p.m. But I didn't know it was going to be in Patterson. I lived in East Bronx, in New York. So I wasn't so sure that I wanted to take that job because it was a big trip. But when I found out that they were going to give me $35 a week, and I was only making $18 a week, I think I ought to take the job. So I did. So, I was 18 years old at that time, and I lived with my family, with my parents and my 5 siblings. And I had to get up at 5:30 in the morning. At 5 o'clock in the morning, I got up Aladdin Street in the dark at 5:30, and in the South Bronx, where today you wouldn't be seen there, but there was a nice Irish neighborhood at that time. So I didn't know how to get there. I didn't know how to get to Patterson. So I had to, I didn't have a car. And even if I had a car, I couldn't drive it. And if I could drive, I couldn't get the gas, because that's the way it was at that time. You probably remember, I mean, you all remember what was going on in World War II. So, anyway, I figured out that I would leave, but I left my house at 5:30 a.m. I would walk 6 blocks to the subway, take the East Side subway going down to 96th Street, then go upstairs to the Northwest Side subway to 186th Street, where I got up on the street and got a bus, going over the George Washington Bridge, watching the sun rise in the morning on the George Washington Bridge. And finally I got to Patterson at 7 o'clock. Wow. Check in the time. Okay. So, they met me at the front of the gate when I came into the factory. And there was a group of people there that they got people together that were going to give us a tour of the factory. So we saw this, we saw that, I remember. The only thing I really remember was the foundry. That was something that was really amazing. And it was very, very hot. And it was a lot of fire flames, like it was like a cavern of flames, and very big flames reaching up there. And men were working there, putting in metal, making stuff. I didn't even know what they were making, but that's what they were doing. Right. And everything smelled good. I thought I was in hell. Yeah. You know, that's the way it appeared to me, because it was so terrible. Right. So, but then people were working at that. So anyway, I got as fast as I could. Then the next thing that they did, they took us to the smoke room where each person was going to be working. So my work was in the purchasing department, and they took me in there. There was a big room with a lot of women working on a lot of desks, but they didn't have a desk for me. So they put me into the conference room. And there was a very large table and a lot of chairs, and one man sitting there doing something with papers. And I was supposed to be his secretary. And I didn't have a typewriter, didn't even have a pad or piece of nothing to write with. So we worked it out anyway. And he was a buyer. It was a purchasing department. They were buying all kinds of things for the world, for the airplanes, but nothing for the people in the store. That's why I didn't have a typewriter. And they ultimately did get me a typewriter. But the reason that happened, I think, is because Wrights, where they're working so fast, trying to get everything done, they weren't paying attention to what was on the inside. So people didn't have desks, and so that's what happened to that. But I stayed on that job for only about 2 weeks, maybe a little longer, because the man who was supposed to be my boss rarely showed up. He hardly ever came to work. I figured he was an alcoholic. When he wasn't there, I would go around to the girls at the desks, different desks, and ask if I could help them. None of them would say, "Let me help them," because they didn't know they knew I didn't know what they were doing. Maybe they didn't want me to know, I don't know. Anyway, so they transferred me to another department. So in the other department, it turned out to be where a few men were working on blueprints. And and I didn't know, what do I know about blueprints? I was only an 18-year-old kid out of high school. And they also, maybe, I think they were doing blueprints on the airplane engines. But what they did, they were very nice to me, and they showed me what they were doing. And then when they had a correction, it was a red mark on the blueprint, a red mark that showed that it was being corrected. And I had to record it, and then file it away. And it was all classified information. So it was classified. I locked it. They put it in the drawer and locked it. It was a little office, and I was there alone, and I didn't know what else to do. Nobody told me anything. So guess what? I didn't know anything about engines. I didn't know anything about blueprints. So they said, well, I have to learn something about airplane engines. So we got a couple of girls together who also didn't know anything about airplane engines. And they had us go to this evening school where we learned how to take apart an airplane engine and then put it back together again, and then study the different parts and what they would call, what they would do, and all that stuff. So that's how I got to learn a little bit about blueprints and engines. But then again, there wasn't enough work for me in that department either, because that's all they were doing was working on blueprints. I couldn't work on the blueprints. I was just the secretary that filed them in the cabinets. So sometimes I wandered away. They called me the wanderer. To another shop next door, where there were men testing steel bars. There was some strength with the strength of the airplanes. I didn't understand what that means. They had these bars and they were testing them with strength. They wanted them to be very strong. It was the airplane parts that they were doing. And so they were very nice. They were cute. The guy was cute. I had nice conversations with them. So guess what? I got transferred again. So I got transferred again. So this time they sent me to another Wright Aeronautical factory in another town, just on the outside of Patterson, called Fairlawn. And I will tell you how that looked. It was so much different, so much nicer than the factory I was in, because it was grass, there was a brook, there was a bridge, and you had to walk over the bridge to the factory, and it was very, very pleasant and very nice. It was a place where you could go out and eat out there on a nice day and sit down at a table. I had a table and bench there, and you could look at the turtles running around, swimming around in the brook. So that was very nice. So the department that I was assigned to was called the pattern shop. Now I always thought that a pattern was used for making clothing, but here the patterns were being made for the propellers.
Oh yeah.
And they had there was the two groups of men there. One was working on wood patterns, and one was working on metal patterns. Some of the men came from Scotland and some Wales. And that's where they learned their trade from their families, because the ones who would work from the wood were making wheels. So they were called wheelwrights. And then the ones that were making metal were working on cars, and their families previously, before they came to this country. So they were cartwrights. That's what their names were. And they were very good at what they were doing. Well, my job in that department was to be the secretary for the foreman of the whole department. And I was a stenographer, that's what I was. I wanted to be a stenographer, but they wouldn't let me until I got here. So I don't remember his name, but he was a large man from Scotland, and he spoke with a very strong Scotch brogue. It took me a while to get used to his dictation. But he was very nice to me also. Everybody was very nice to me there. So then we had, there were 3 other young women in the office that I said, let me go to. And we each had a specialty job. And I became friends with all of them. And they let me work. They let me help them when I didn't have what to do. Well, actually, they did. And so one of us had to go into the shop, get the time cards, and then check their hours of work. Then another one of the ladies had to do the payroll for the workers in the shop. And one was the bookkeeper for the buying and stuff, needing supplies and stuff. And I was the secretary. So we weren't supposed to go into the workshop because we weren't allowed to distract them, because we were all nice young ladies who were all the same age category, like 18, 19 years old. But sometimes we had to, so we picked up the time cards. And sometimes at lunch, when it was a nice day outside, we would sit out there by the brook and eat and watch the turtles swim. Well, the men all knew our names, and so we were very surprised one morning when we came to work and to find a live turtle on each of our desks with our name printed on it, painted on it. They painted the turtles with our name. So I had finally found my niche in Wright Aeronautical. Okay, as the war proceeded and things were getting dangerous, the factory was working 24 hours, 7 days a week. If you worked 40 hours, you got regular pay. If you worked an hour a day, if you worked on Saturday as well, you were paid time and a half. And if you worked on Sunday, you were paid double time. It was very good. That only happened to me once. So I did it, and I got paid $65. That was a lot of money. In those days, it was a lot of money.
That's right.
Because the factory was running all day and all night, the windows were painted black, so that the buildings would not be distinguished. And the German enemy didn't see us, so it was day and night. So we were working under fluorescent lights all the time. Even in the bright daylight, we were working under fluorescent lights. The windows were dark. Oh, and then there was a cafeteria on the premises, but they rarely served meat, because it was meat that all that food was going overseas to the soldiers. Once they did serve red meat, and everyone was very glad.